Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar discussing food marketing environments as influences on obesity and diabetes prevention and control in Black Americans. I'd like to thank you all on behalf of the Council on Black Health, formerly known as the African American Collaborative Obesity Research Network, ACORN, and the Center for Diabetes Translation Research at Washington University, St. Louis, for your participation in this afternoon and interest in this topic. During the presentation today, we ask that you post questions using the Q&A button in the Zoom webinar interface. We will review and select questions for our panelists to respond to after their presentations. If your question was not selected for response, we will share follow-up feedback after today's session. Please feel free to use the chat window to interact with fellow attendees during the session this afternoon. This presentation will be recorded and archived for future viewing. We will publish the webinar online and share the link via email later today. My name is Sheldon Oliver Watts, and I'm the National Director of the Council on Black Health, also known as the Council. The Council is the new identity for the African American Collaborative Obesity Research Network, a collaborative network of scholars and community-based research partners located in over 20 different states. The Council's mission is to develop and promote solutions that achieve healthy Black communities. Our national office is located at Drexel University's Dornsife School of Public Health in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The Council leverages the credibility and perspectives of Black American researchers and research partners to facilitate more relevant, community-engaged, high-impact, actionable solutions that positively impact Black communities. I'm also the core manager of the Solutions to Diabetes in Black Americans core at Washington University Center for Diabetes and Translation Research. As a disparities core, we provide methodological and content expertise to develop innovative approaches that advance the field of diabetes research in Black Americans. Today's session will discuss targeted marketing in the Black community. Targeted marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages may undercut efforts to prevent and control obesity and diabetes, especially among Black Americans who have a particularly high exposure to such marketing. This webinar will present results of research documenting targeted marketing to Black communities. There's a large body of evidence that Black Americans are exposed to such targeted marketing as reflected in the mix of foods available and exposure to advertisements and other forms of promotions in Black communities. Research results on Black consumers' responses to target marketing will also be presented. Potential ways to incorporate food marketing environment considerations in obesity and diabetes research and practice will be discussed. Our respected panelists today include Shiriki Kumanyika, founder and chair of the Council on Black Health. Dr. Kumanyika is a research professor in the Department of Community Health and Prevention here at Drexel University in the Department of Community Health and Prevention. She also retains an appointment as Professor Emerita of Epidemiology at the University of Pennsylvania Perelman School of Medicine. During the past decade, Dr. Kumanyika has collaborated with other council members to document the heavy exposure of Black Americans to targeted marketing of unhealthy foods and beverages, explore influences of food and beverages prices on product purchases of Black shoppers, and develop ways to improve support for healthy eating in food environments. She's a member of the National Academy of Medicine and a past president of the American Public Health Association, and is involved in numerous public health-related advisory and policy activities in the United States and abroad. Dr. Kumanyika has authored or co-authored more than 300 scientific articles, reports, commentaries, and book chapters. Sonya Grier is a professor of marketing and department chair at the Kogod School of Business at American University. She conducts research on the social impact of marketing activities. Dr. Grier has published her research in leading marketing, psychology, public health, and health policy journals, and has also created 2 award-winning research-based documentary films. Dr. Grier currently serves as on the editorial board for the Journal of Public Policy and Marketing, the Journal of Consumer Affairs, and as a member of the National Academy's Food Forum. Most recently, she helped to create a research network focused on race in the marketplace, RIM or RIM, and co-chaired their first conference. Dr. Grier teaches coursework related to marketing for social change to undergraduate and graduate students. She received her PhD in marketing from Northwestern University, as well as her MBA and BA degrees I'm also from Northwestern University. So I'd now like to invite Dr. Kumanyika to open our presentation today.
Thanks, Sheldon, and welcome to those of you who are participating in this webinar, and thanks for your interest in this topic. I think by the end of this webinar, we're hoping that you'll be able to recognize the pervasive target marketing of unhealthy food and beverages to Black Americans as a very important issue, to understand the potential for the effects of target marketing on food purchases and consumption, consider ways to mitigate these potentially adverse effects, and identify research questions that account for the effects of target marketing on the effectiveness of clinical and public health interventions. So just an overview of the webinar. So I'll talk in a couple of slides about the context for this topic and why it's important, and then we'll talk about target marketing, what we mean by food marketing environments, and so forth, drawing a lot on research that we've done over the past decade or so. That includes research on how Black consumers experience their food marketing environments, and then we'll close with some implications for research and action. This is a slide of the obesity prevalence data from the National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey, or NHANES. So some of the latest data published, and I have adults on the left and youth on the right, as you can see. And this is just a reminder that obesity is a major health problem in Black communities. The arrow is pointing to the 47% prevalence of obesity in Black Americans. You can see it's higher than whites, who are the first bar there, which is about 38%. And if you look at the gender-specific data, you'll see that there's a similar prevalence in Black men and white men, but in the data for women, the prevalence is 55%, much higher than in white women. And in the children, 22% overall, and then about 20% of Black boys and 1/4 of Black girls have obesity. So it really, and having obesity in childhood certainly is really a risk factor for developing obesity and diabetes later in life. So these are serious statistics that we can't ignore. The prevalence of diabetes is shown on this slide, and you can see the arrows pointing to the data for the Black people in the population. The American Indians and Alaska Natives are the only population whose rates of diabetes are higher than in Black Americans. For Hispanic Americans, they're similar. In women, if you look at the comparison of white non-Hispanic women and Black women, you'll see that the prevalence of diabetes is double, and that goes along with the high rates of obesity, because obesity is in fact the main risk factor for diabetes. About 85 to 90% of people with type 2 diabetes have obesity, and maybe 1/3 or more of people who have obesity become diabetic at some point. And this is just diagnosed diabetes. There's also undiagnosed diabetes. And so we're relating this food marketing issue to the ability to prevent and control obesity and diabetes in Black Americans. So our underlying premise is that a focus on food marketing environments is especially important to identify solutions, because eating patterns and physical activity are fundamental to obesity and diabetes prevention and control. By avoiding consumption of too many calories, more calories than you need, and gaining excess weight, I've acknowledged that expending enough calories through physical activity is another important part of the equation of control of obesity and diabetes, but there's no way to work off the amount of calories that you can consume in our current food supply. So we're focusing on food today because the excess calorie intake from food is really one of the major drivers of obesity and diabetes. It's now well established that food and activity behaviors of individuals are strongly affected by characteristics of their environments. It's not just the individual's willpower and ideas about food preferences. Environments are having a major influence on what people can choose and do choose. And so therefore, understanding how food is marketed and how consumers respond to that marketing is really critical. But the issue has not been really systematically addressed in public health research, and especially in public health research on Black Americans. So I'll turn this over now to Sonya, who's going to talk about what we mean by food marketing environments and what target marketing is and so forth. And then I'll come back and talk about some studies after she's reviewed our target marketing research.
Thank you, Shiriki, and welcome to you all. Thank you for joining us today. I want to start by making sure that you have a sense of the conceptual basis of marketing. And you can see the definition here on the slide, with marketing as an activity, a set of institutions, and a set of processes. And I think it's important to think about marketing as a particular system of activities and institutions, not just as what you might see as the output. And implicit in this definition, or explicit somewhat, is this notion of exchange. And exchange theory views consumers as agents who, out of self-interest, seek to optimize their own value by doing what gives them the greatest benefit for the least cost. So marketing practice tries to create activities and initiatives that create perceptions of value among consumers to prompt these voluntary exchanges. So I tell you how wonderful, my soda is, then you give me money and I give you soda. And that exchange of value, though, has a lot more dimensions to it than just exchanging that money for that particular product. And so the key point of marketing is about this exchange of value, and it is both a series of concepts around how to do this and activities to implement this in the marketplace. Oh, sorry. So the way that this happens, sorry about that, is that there's a process called segmenting, targeting, and positioning. And this process is the basis whereby different consumer segments may be exposed to different food and beverage products, prices, or promotions. So since you can't necessarily address consumers individually all the time, marketing companies segment populations into subgroups of people who share different characteristics. So African Americans, or people who drink a lot of soda, or people who go to fast food restaurants very frequently. And they use those segments as a basis to reach them with activities based on the fact that they should respond very similarly. So once a group is segmented, a company is going to decide who should they target, whether they target one or more segments based on specific goals, such as increasing usage of a product or shortening purchase cycles so that people go out and buy it more. Then they position the product to appeal to these target segments, which includes their specific actions related to these tools of product, price, place, and promotion, which are known as the 4 Ps of marketing, or the marketing mix. The product is what you offer, the price is the cost, the place is where and how the product is available or accessible, and the promotion is what you do to motivate people to respond. And what you see in the middle is that the backbone of this marketing strategy process is consumer research. Research is used to establish the goals and objectives, to segment and target the market, and to figure out the best way to position the product to the target market. And this research often involves an in-depth analysis of the attitudes, beliefs, values, and behavior of Black consumers. And there's a large, diverse research industry focused specifically on Black consumers that looks to try to understand ways to reach them, especially since these are growing markets. So here, I'm going to show you what a targeted food marketing might look like using the 4 Ps of marketing. So in terms of product strategy, different types of products may be targeted to different consumers. You may have different types of packaging or portion sizes that appear in different areas for different consumers. The distribution strategy, we're talking about how frequent are fast food restaurants or supermarkets in a particular area, and the variety and quality of food that might be available. When price, we think not only about the actual price, but the relative price given other market basket items, as well as the cost to access different products. And then in terms of promotion, which is what we think about most often in terms of marketing, but it's just one piece of the system. And that includes not just advertising, but sales promotion, sampling, digital marketing, all the things you see on social media are all part of the targeted food marketing environment. And I'm going to show you an example. You can see that there are different ethnic marketing approaches that might include internet websites, mobile marketing, even community relations, which is historically how Black audiences were reached. Many of the soda companies back in the late 50s had groups that focused specifically on trying to garner African American customers once sort of the segregation of marketing opened up in some ways. So here's an example from 365 Black, which is a campaign by McDonald's. It started in 2002, and it was supposed to be a month-long campaign, but it's been going on since 2002. And this campaign looks to demonstrate that African American culture and achievement should be celebrated 365 days a year, not just during Black History Month. The campaign features the African baobab tree on the website. It runs ads that feature African American celebrities such as Venus Williams. It sponsors these little-known Black history facts on a daily radio show that has more than 122 million listeners. It displays posters in the fast food outlets. It distributed Black history booklets in schools in collaboration with Coca-Cola. And it has supports all kinds of community events, including an academic achievement program for middle school students, a Black college tour. And the use of these ethnic cues in the campaign, such as African American celebrities, cultural symbols, support of cultural institutions, and the use of ethnic media, such as Black radio shows, can really increase the salience of the identity and evoke more consistent responses and favorable responses to what it is that McDonald's is selling. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about some of our research that has looked at the food marketing environment. Our initial research really looked to understand what was the actual food marketing environment, its role in targeting interventions, and the overall relationship of targeted marketing to public health. So for example, we conducted a review of academic research to examine the question of whether African Americans are more likely to be targeted with unhealthy foods than white consumers. We conducted a literature review which identified 20 articles over a 14-year period. And even though the data was small, it was very consistent. We found that promotion was dominated by low-cost, low-energy food products, that positive nutritional messages were less frequently, and that relative to white neighborhoods, predominantly Black neighborhoods, had fewer choices, fewer healthier choices, and a higher density of fast food outlets. There was also some evidence that fast food might cost more, but that data was limited. Then we also looked at how the food marketing environment might play a role in targeting interventions to youth, and identified how TV watching is really critical for the exposure of Black kids to marketing efforts. National studies have shown that Black youth spend significantly more time with media, and especially watch more TV than white youth. And they are exposed to and respond to marketing that is targeted to them, to older Black kids, to kids in general across races, and to Black adults. We also looked more broadly at the role of target marketing in public health and found that it's really challenging to try and curb target marketing, as this is standard business practice in a self-regulated industry without any specific regulations around targeting. In addition, it's especially hard to challenge ethnic targeting in relation to adults, given the notion that adults are viewed as competent enough to make rational decisions, and that if you try to restrict that in any way, that can be perceived as a form of paternalism. So one key method used to target Black consumers is geographic targeting. And this is a basis of marketing that's to be where your customers are, whether you're thinking about in terms of specific geographic places or in terms of the media that people use. So we conducted some studies of outdoor advertising for unhealthy foods in different zip codes. Given the prevalence of segregation in the US, we were able to identify predominantly Black, Latino, and white areas. And we found that African American zip codes had the highest densities of unhealthy food advertising, followed by Latinos and then white zip code areas. In another study, we examined the proximity of fast food near schools and the relationship of this proximity to students' weight. We found that the associations between having a fast food restaurant near the school was stronger for Black and Hispanic students at low income and urban schools, up to 4 times greater than general associations. And the results of both of these studies show that the role of marketing is significant in terms of place as well as promotion. So now I'm going to hand it back over to Shiriki to give you a specific case study related to sugar-sweetened beverages.
Thanks, Sonya. That's really a great overview of marketing, and I think for a public health audience, which is what I think probably we have on this webinar, it shows us what we are up against in terms of things that are common and legal and pervasive, while we are trying to encourage people to eat in a healthier way. They're being bombarded with marketing, especially targeted to eat in a different way. Now, this case study of sugar-sweetened beverage targeting was developed several years ago now to put the story together in a way that could be used for advocacy and to show, especially people who wanted to advocate for Black American health, how marketing fits into a picture where they might not have recognized it before. So this is available on our website, and the references are at the end of the presentation you'd be able to get. So we basically laid out the case that sugar-sweetened beverage consumption is higher in Blacks than whites in most of the data sets, and that, for example, consumption increased in one period of time in Black adolescents while it remained stable in white peers. And we've also seen, marketing may decrease in one group but still be targeted to another group, and we've seen that for sugar-sweetened beverages and Black Americans. And so we pointed out that there are studies that actually link this excess consumption of sugar-sweetened beverages in comparison to other populations to weight gain, obesity, and development of type 2 diabetes, as well as dental decay in studies where you could pull out the data for Black Americans and show how it related to their sugar-sweetened beverage consumption. So we found that very compelling, and then made the point that reducing sugar-sweetened beverage consumption is especially important because obesity and diabetes are more prevalent, as we make that point, just like I made in the beginning of this presentation. And this brief is still being used by advocates for the sugar-sweetened beverage taxes and so forth, and to show people that this is a particular area where Blacks can benefit. So now I'll move on to talk about some of our consumer research. And as Sonya showed you on the target marketing slide, consumer research is something that's done as the foundation of target marketing, but what we would think of as consumer research really does not appear in the public health literature that much. In fact, some of the papers that Sonya works on and the people who do this consumer research, you can't find if you only search PubMed. You have to go into a broader Google search or something like that, because the marketing journals, public policy and marketing and stuff, don't show up in public health databases. So I want to change. Oh, here we go. I have now control of the slides. So the next slide is one of our studies that ended up being really about food price. We had done 4 exploratory focus group studies in cities that were led by our members in different cities to explore what consumers thought about their marketing environments, how they experienced them. And this is very open-ended questioning. We didn't lead people to talk about price specifically or as the major focus, but we were really surprised to see how strongly it came out across these 4 different areas. It was Durham, North Carolina, Prince George's County, Maryland, Birmingham, Alabama, and Chicago. And so we ended up putting together a multi-site paper from this on this qualitative analysis to look at how price was discussed. And some of the key findings are listed here. There was a clear importance of low prices and getting low prices for food, but that was weighed against other value considerations. And so we saw that price was important, but it wasn't the only thing people were thinking about when they were buying. Healthfulness was important as well, although in some cases the low prices took precedence even when health was a consideration. And so the respondents pointed out that it wasn't simply that they didn't care about health or they didn't care what their kids ate, but they couldn't always afford to buy the things that they thought they or their children should be eating, and frustration with the unhealthful nature of some of the low-cost convenience foods. And I'll just draw your attention to the 2 quotes at the bottom of this slide. One of the participants from Durham said, the truth of the matter is that it's hard for me to buy the kinds of foods I really do want my son to eat. A participant in Birmingham said, somewhat cynically, I couldn't hear her voice, but I can imagine, you already told us to eat wheat bread because it's healthier, but now you're going to charge me more because I want to eat healthier, because the wheat bread was more expensive. Another study that we did, which was a totally different approach, was done with Lisa Powell and colleagues at University of Illinois at Chicago. We started looking at price promotions or discounts, basically. And the reason that we started looking at price promotions was because in consulting with some of our colleagues in the public health law field to try to see where we might be able to intervene or find something to advocate for, they basically convinced us that what they call real prices or regular prices, we couldn't touch those prices because they are dictated by a whole host of economic factors that you couldn't really intervene on. But then we said, well, what about discounts? Because discounts are something that have been a target for policy change before. In the tobacco area, for example, forbidding discounts on tobacco products and giving coupons for tobacco products and so forth. So we started thinking, well, maybe we could have some leverage over the pricing issues if it turns out that discounts are important and they're pervasive, and if the discounts are more likely to be for foods that are less healthy. So we have a very large data set that Lisa Powell had from the Bridging the Gap study that was done at the University of Illinois at Chicago. They nationwide sample of food stores where they go in and do audits of what's there, and they had ticked off a box of whether certain foods were on sale. So we were able to use those data. And the findings are at the right of the slide. The details are in the paper. So we found that we looked at different types of stores, price promotions for supermarkets and limited assortment stores, and for a set of different products that we thought were important to view all different types of products. And we found that that the promotions or the discounting was highest in supermarkets compared to the smaller grocery and limited assortment stores. It varied by type of product. we thought we would find a difference in discounting, might find a difference in discounting across different types of communities by income and so forth and race. We didn't find that discounting was more prevalent in certain communities. But we did find that there were some differences in discounting for less healthy versus more healthy products and for smaller and larger package sizes. So there seem to be areas there where we might be able to change things. It's interesting given the comment about wheat bread because it turns out that wheat bread was likely to be on sale quite often, and we attributed that to the fact that wheat bread was now being recommended for the WIC program, and so that it had created a big market for wheat bread, and the manufacturers could afford to discount it. So discounting is a possibility. We did another study, which I think is the next one I have coming up. For some reason I don't get the, oh, there it is, okay. I think that went too fast, right. So we did it, so after we had, or around the same time actually, we were doing that big study in this national database, we also looked at discounts in one large grocery store in Philadelphia. And we were lucky enough with colleagues at Albert Einstein Medical Center to get the loyalty card data for a whole year from that one store. And we could tell who the African American participants were. We could tell what they were buying. And so we were able to code what a large number of transactions to see where the discounts were on the high-end, low-calorie foods and whether people were buying things preferentially when they were on sale. And then we augmented this with a qualitative study in some shoppers who were demographically similar to ask them about some of the things we found using that mixed methods approach, and we're able to understand a little bit better from that. So the two types of foods we looked at, HCF is high calorie foods, and LCF, we picked out sugar sweetened beverages and then a set of savory snacks that have high energy density, high calories, high fat snacks. And then we looked at fruits, vegetables, and low fat dairy as low calorie foods. Here are the findings and conclusions. I won't read all of these, but we had a lot of transactions, as you can see, from those families, because it was the shoppers over a long period of time. And what we basically found was that the likelihood or the odds of buying foods on sale was greater for the less healthy foods, for the soft drinks in particular, and for the grain-based and sweet snacks, and that was not the case with any of the low-calorie foods. So buying, fruits and vegetables on sale and the dairy products, we didn't see an association with the sale prices. The more money people saved, the more they were likely to buy things on sale. I mean, it kind of makes sense of what people are doing. And the focus group participants kind of confirmed this, that they really liked sales. They didn't see the sales enough on things that they liked, but it gave us the idea that that might be something that one could work on in terms of changing what's going on in stores in terms of discounting, to get more discounts on the products that were healthier that people wanted. We used some receipt data from a study. We had 35, 36 women collect, Black women, household shoppers, collect data for a month. They had to shop at a supermarket at least once a month. And so we use that in two ways. This study relates to where they shop, because we were interested in understanding consumer response to these interventions where supermarkets are put into neighborhoods that you're probably all aware of this, the putting in a new supermarket to try to stimulate healthier eating. And we were interested in where people were buying their healthy and unhealthy foods and where they shopped. And so for this one, we could use the receipts to actually find out where people shopped. We didn't have to ask them if they used a certain store, because we could tell from their receipts where the food was purchased. And the map was the kind of map that each participant was shown from her data. The stores where all the stores that were in the pathway in the neighborhood near where she lived, and in places where the women went. We asked them to talk about their routines, so we knew where their church was or their job and where they dropped their kids off at school and so forth. And one of the findings from this was that people didn't always shop near home. Sometimes they did, but sometimes they didn't. If they could save time or get things they wanted or be more efficient in other places, they shopped at other places. And so this was additional information about consumer behavior, that if you wanted to influence consumers, you couldn't just assume that they were going to the store around the corner and put all of your effort there. You had to think more about how to help people navigate in wherever they shopped, which may not be a place that where you were doing an intervention. This study used the same data from the supermarket receipts, and we coded all the foods that people bought with this high calorie or low calorie classification. So we had the sweet snacks and soft drinks, or savory snacks and grain-based snacks, and then we had the fruit and dairy, fresh fruit and dairy products for the low-calorie foods. And this was a surprise to us, although in retrospect, it's kind of obvious. So most people do a lot of their shopping in a supermarket if they can get to one. And if people can get to a supermarket, they buy most of their healthy food there, and they also buy most of their unhealthy food there. So that's what we found. Most of the shopping trips were included one of these healthy, high-calorie food items and one with the low-calorie foods. And most of the trips where they bought these foods were to the full-service supermarkets. And so even though small stores are important for fill-ins and for some people who can't get to small stores, anybody who can get to a supermarket one way or the other, we need to intervene in ways that or encourage shopping behaviors that will decrease the purchases of high-calorie foods in supermarkets, not just other places in the neighborhood. This is the sort of our culminating study on the consumer behavior, testing an approach to sensitize consumers to target marketing. What we did, we built on the approaches we had used in some exploratory studies in the same 4 cities I mentioned before, of exploring actual reactions to scenarios about marketing, some of the types of things that Sonya was talking about. And then we realized that we could try to educate people or inform them about marketing techniques and see if it made any difference in their attitudes about marketing. The first and initial work indicated that people weren't necessarily that negative about marketing. We did it in a very neutral way so that we didn't tell them, oh, you're being marketed to, or you're being, exploited by marketers, but we just showed them different things that happen in the marketing environment and asked what people thought about that. So for this study, we started off, it was a before and after study, so we had focus groups of mixed gender for adults and gender specific for youth in 2 cities. Well, we did this in Philadelphia as a pilot, and then in Durham and Prince George's County. And this is the technique we used to ask about the marketing scenarios. We showed a slide like this that showed some sort of a marketing factor. This is product placement. Oh no, this is sponsorship. This is Lil Wayne performing a concert that's sponsored by a beverage company, by Coke. But we had other ones about product placements and neighborhood store locations and so forth. And the moderator said, do you see this as marketing? And we used a polling type technique, a clicker technique, so the moderator could see when people said yes, no, or unsure, could see on the screen that some people said yes, no, or unsure, and then would use that to probe. Okay, somebody who said this is marketing, why do you think it's marketing? But somebody who said no, then they would be asked to talk about why this is, why they didn't think it was marketing, and so forth. Then at the end of that session, we gave them a booklet. There's a picture of that booklet on this slide that described marketing techniques and how things are done in the marketing field and how things are targeted. And we suggested that the people take this home and think about it, look at it, discuss it with their family members or friends, and then they came back a week later. And the results on this slide show the analysis of the attitudes before and after. Now, these were qualitative data, but in this case, we also used a technique of counting responses before and after. We looked at codes that were used only before and only after at least once in one of these 8 focus groups, and then we coded all occurrences of those. So if you look at the hatch bars, the stripe bars, those are the things that occurred after the sensitization by having this booklet. And what you can see here is a pattern of the food environment as a social justice category, that theme, and the comments under that. Many of them were either only or much more common in the post-focus groups, the post-sensitization than pre-sensitization. So a few people saw some social justice issues in the pre-sensitization, but most of those comments came out afterwards, which said that this technique actually helped people to see that there were some things going on that they might want to change. The seeing the marketer's perspective up at the top was very common because, again, people are not that negative about marketing, and so people were, you won't say making excuses for marketing, but understanding, well, it's a good business tactic and so forth. And then there was another theme that came out of respect for the community, and some of those were seen both pre and post, about assumptions marketers are making, better examples of healthy eating being needed, and so forth. So we think that this technique has some promise for working with Black consumers about understanding and navigating their marketing environments. This last study, which I'm going to review quickly, and then we'll conclude and go to the Q&A. A colleague, Elaine Pruitt in Little Rock, led a study where we tried to bring shoppers and grocers together and say, okay, grocers and retailers, they're not all bad. Consumers are reasonable. Let's see what each group would like to see changed and whether or not that's possible. So this was qualitative. The focus groups were with Black female household shoppers, and with the grocers, they were with all of the grocers, independent grocers. We thought that was better than the chain grocers. We thought that the independent grocers would have more latitude, and we did focus groups to find out what they thought about food pricing in particular, but other marketing techniques. And so this first slide is for one of the themes, which was advertisements. So you can compare what the store owners said and what the consumers said. The store owners said, yeah, we're very much aware, we're keenly aware of influence of ads on behavior. And the consumers said, increase the number of ads to promote healthier foods, provide alerts for healthy foods on sale. Store owners said, it's an interesting idea to be more health conscious with advertising. And the consumer said, stop plastering all over the ads everything that's processed full of salt, sugar, and start putting the produce, on those circulars. And the managers didn't feel that they were in control of the advertising, and the consumers were wanting to run specials on things that maybe the circulars didn't have because the grocers themselves didn't make those circulars. It would help to understand the grocer's perspective as well. And when we really got into the responses from the grocers, we realized that we'd been kind of naive thinking that the independent chains had more leverage, because in fact, these manufacturers and distributors felt that they had less leverage, and we got the message that we needed to go farther upstream in terms of the supply side. So the small businesses said, we don't have the same leverage in the marketplace that the big chains have. We can't get a good contract. We can't get those good prices. The costs are astronomical. We don't have that collective buying power. and we don't have any way of getting any volume purchasing discounts. So again, that gave us ideas about possible interventions and how we would have to work with smaller grocers or maybe go to chains to see if we could get a better deal for consumers. So the implications from that study were that there were differences in the way that the shoppers and the grocers viewed things. The grocers didn't actually recognize that the shoppers wanted healthier options or knew how to prepare them. And various co-creation approaches might be possible, but there was less latitude than we thought on the grocer side. These last couple of slides before we sum up are just about a tool that we have for kind of on-the-ground, hands-on community assessments. We've created a community measures toolkit along with a benchmarking index that's at the county level. But we just wanted to point out that another way that people have used to do kind of consumer engaged research is to send the people, work with community members to go out in the community and see for themselves what's in their market environment. So this toolkit is available and has been used by some of our members to do case studies. We have another one that's being written up about neighborhood gardens in one case in Philadelphia, in a rural area in North Carolina, to look at what's in the stores that are accessible to people in that rural area and to talk about what might be changed. And then community action in Chicago, talking again with local retailers of these were smaller stores and consumers and seeing what's possible to work out things where consumers could have better access to healthy options. So I'll turn this over to Sonya to give her conclusions, and then I'll finish up with my implications.
Right, thanks, Shiriki. And I think based on all of the research we've discussed, hopefully we've left you with some key points regarding the pervasiveness of targeted food marketing to Black Americans, its potential for effects on food purchases and consumption, and how it might be incorporated into your research. I want to highlight a few key points. One is that marketing is a system. It's more than advertising. It's a set of institutions, activities, and processes that try to exchange value in order to facilitate consumption. So we can't think just about advertising or any piece of marketing. We have to consider the entire system when we think about interventions. Second, the food marketing environments of Black consumers do not support healthy eating. And this serves as competition to any type of intervention you might develop, so that context that it provides is something you have to think about in your research. And I think the last point is that counter-marketing is challenging, and our sensitization, the pre and post, shows you that there is some opportunity, but that the beliefs are that Black consumers are kind of comfortable with marketing as a business practice. And that makes sense because there are benefits that come from marketing in your community sometimes and being exposed, and people don't want to be left out. I mean, marketing was a key aspect, or inclusion in the business economy and within markets was a key aspect of the civil rights. Think about all the lunch counter sit-ins and that kind of thing. So this is something that's going to be challenging to try and change, but thinking about it and engaging with it in the research may provide other ways that we can think about making those changes. And I think Shiriki's going to talk about some implications.
Right. So this is just to tie this up. I hope that you have found this enlightening, even with your own observations about the marketing to which you're exposed. I think the take-home messages for researchers and advocates in Black communities is that consumer engagement is going to be critical to making any changes in the food marketing environments. And public health may have erred quite a bit on the side of seeing the problem and going in, kind of to save the world, talking about, community change, but not actually understanding how people are experiencing that marketing environment. What are the logistics? How do people see the tactics? if they're going for, if they are going for discounts, or what's driving the pricing and the purchases of things at different prices, and especially understanding consumer demand, because any marketer or a seller or retailer that you talk to will say, well, if people want it, we will provide it. And that gets to be kind of a circular argument, because if consumer demand isn't expressed, where people feel that it's safe to market in a different way or profitable to market in a different way, then we will never get anywhere. So really doing that consumer research as a public health type of research, not just leaving it all to the marketers to find out, how to do, how to promote what they decide to promote. As Sonya mentioned, I think that the sensitization technique has some promise. I think it could be included in group counseling. We usually in behavioral studies, I've done a lot of weight control studies, and usually in those studies we have like a shopping trip. One session is a shopping trip and you go to the supermarket, or things where you talk about purchasing foods. But I think that aspect could be ramped up to really understand and help people to navigate these supermarkets, not just kind of show them where the healthy food is, but sensitize them to all the marketing techniques that are inside of that supermarket and around driving them to certain products. So I think that has potential and for advocacy, also for raising awareness of social justice issues. And finally, the environmental assessments and the engagement with retailers might be a strategy that will yield some change on the ground, and that we shouldn't rule out engaging directly with the people who are selling food or marketing as a part of the strategy we're using. And the environmental assessments, I think, are really eye-opening for consumers, and they can lead to other benefits for consumers and communities as well, because it is a form of activation and mobilization that can sort of spill over positively into other things that people in communities might want to change. So I will stop there, and I believe that we are now open for questions and answers, and Sheldon has sent a message around about how you can ask your questions.
Yeah, so I did send a message out shortly, just a chat message to anyone. If you're interested in any of what the panel has discussed thus far this afternoon, this is a great opportunity to just post your questions, and I will pose those questions to the panelists. I did have a comment that came out of the chat, and obviously someone was interested in terms of McDonald's marketing heavily towards African Americans. So I'm not sure if our panelists could just speak about some of the practices that several corporations or large companies might engage in terms of targeted marketing in the Black community. The ones that come to mind for me are obviously McDonald's, but I think of Coca-Cola as well, who they both heavily kind of have a kind of tailored marketing for the Black community.
Yeah, Sheldon, that's a great question, and I think most major companies have some type of targeted efforts to Black and other minority consumers, given the demographic growth and changes that we see in the U.S. Almost every company now has a particular unit that focuses on emerging markets, as some of them are called, or that focus on specific groups. And that's kind of a tension in the ad industry. Do you focus on specific groups? Do you go and get a Black agency to deal with some of these Black issues, or are we going to have the general market agencies target all different groups? But virtually every organization, major company, has products or particular advertisements or particular promotions that speak specifically to Black consumers.
And in terms of thinking about those corporations and how they particularly, kind of focus on these segments that they've identified, how do you feel about potentially kind of coming up with ways in which we might be able to encourage the food industry to more ethically market products in the Black community? And when I say ethical, I'm thinking really terms of moving away from the heavy marketing of the non-healthy products, maybe emphasizing some of the healthier products that they may offer. And I think about a company like Coca-Cola. They're a huge company that has, more than just, sugar sweetened beverages. They have tons of other, products as well, which, in comparison would be considered much more healthful. But we're not seeing the same, I guess, proportion or level of marketing of those products as you do see with, some of the less healthier products.
I would say that it's changing somewhat, and you do see more, but not nearly enough. And one of the challenges is that marketers will say there's not the demand. And I think that's what Shiriki was getting at when she said, we really have to both understand consumer demand as well as engage with it, because as the consumer demand shifts, it will be easier to shift what retailers do, although they go hand in hand. You have to think both about supply and demand in tandem.
Yeah, and let me add to that. So we didn't present some of the work we had done together with the Rudd Center now at University of Connecticut, and the studies on children's marketing, because I think that the patterns of marketing to children are really stark, or marketing products for that are eaten by children, like breakfast cereals and stuff like that. And so when we saw these real discrepancies in which products were marketed, like to Black children versus the mix of products marketed to white children or to mothers, and how they were marketed, we came up with a very strong recommendation to increase the balance of the marketing, to market, show cause why you were not marketing healthier products. And the way that some of the data, when they get these the marketing data from the big data sets from the companies, which cost a fortune, but some of these are groups are funded to do this. It is so stark that you could probably argue against the demand argument, because no demand for some of these cereals would be that pointed to a particular product, and and rule out demand for anything else. And so I think we can use the children's data, where marketing and ethical issues in marketing are more prominent and have more traction, to really say, how come we're not getting the benefit of some of your better products?
So we're coming right around on the 2 o'clock hour, and we currently don't have any questions from the audience, but I'm not sure if the panelists would like to share any closing remarks outside of what you shared at the close of the presentation, just kind of takeaways that people might be able to use in terms of the work that they're doing.
Yeah, I just saw a quick question in the chat from Deborah Young about how we knew that the shoppers were Black. I think that's in the buying on sale study. We asked. I think that's the data that the grocery store was asked to give us, and the neighborhood where that grocery store is like 90% African American. So the data we got were, I think, pre-identified as for Black shoppers. In terms of closing remarks, I just want to say that I think it's really a great privilege to be able to share some of this with you on the web, and it'll be on the archive, because it's such a critical issue that's still kind of invisible in public health, and maybe with this webinar week will help to raise the visibility of this issue and your interest in it. And we are happy to provide consultation on using these concepts if you would like to incorporate them into your research or advocacy.
Great. I'd echo those concerns. It's also not really well developed in the marketing literature, even as much as these are really marketing concepts and marketing issues. When you talk about this kind of targeted marketing in a disproportionate way, it isn't, throughout the marketing literature. So your contributions would be there as well. So thank you.
And thank you as well, our panelists, for sharing this enlightening information today. Hopefully, this has allowed the attendees and those who will, go back and review this presentation at a later date, some new insights on the ways in which targeted marketing really influences risk for health and well-being in the Black community. So I'd like to thank you all for participating in the Solutions to Diabetes in Black Americans webinar, Food Marketing Environments as Influences on Obesity and Diabetes Prevention and Control in Black Americans. We'll be emailing a follow-up evaluation shortly as it relates to the webinar this afternoon, as well as sharing a video of the webinar shortly. And if you note at the end of the slide presentation, we have the references that support many of the slides that were presented today. So we would also make this list of references available, and I'll share that electronically with everyone who was registered, and you should have access to it as well through our portal for sharing the video. So thank you all for participating this afternoon, and I look forward to the next opportunity for engagement. Have a great rest of your week.
Thanks. Bye-bye, everybody.